Thank you for having me. What I'm going to do is Alex, who's there somewhere in the audience, very kindly put together a bunch of slides for me. So I'm going to go through those, some of them fairly quickly, because just to touch base with a few things. Other things are a bit more fun, a bit more interactive. And then when they've finished, open up for questions. So on that note, I'll want to share screen and start going with that if all sorted out on that front. So I'm going to flip through very quickly the first few things. Like, this is the first 56 years of my life in a nutshell, really. And basically it boils down to the fact that I was born in Yorkshire. I still consider it home. I love going home. I love going back to Yorkshire. But I was raised in Guernsey in the Channel Islands. And that's what you can see here on that map. It's a tiny island off the coast of France, 9 miles by 4. It's where I grew up. The beach you see there, that's Cobo Bay. And that was my second home. I live 5 minutes away from it. It's where I go when I was happy, and it's where I go when I was troubled. It's also where I first felt a sense of being connected. I would go when things weren't going particularly well. I had a little trauma in my life, just preteen. I would go there, and I would never be alone. And I would feel the presence of something. And I've written there, the divine, I didn't define, because that's how I thought of it as I was a child, and also later on as well. And I'd leave the beach often knowing what I needed to do, if anything at all. I didn't question it. I was just grateful for it. And that was that. Then, life got busy in my 20s, 30s and 40s. I had a big job. I did a lot of traveling through Europe and the Middle and Far East. It was very people orientated, which is very me. I got married. We've been together for 36 years. It was our 30th wedding anniversary this year. We had two kids. They were the highlight of my life. You see them there, Phoebe and Tommy. And we started globe hopping when Tommy was a couple of weeks old. We left Guernsey, and we've never returned and lived back in the UK or Guernsey since. So from there, I should say from the last slide, what happened in my 40s before we go on to what happened here was I went through a dark night of the soul. Even though life had been wonderful, for some reason, life got very dark, and I mean really dark. I didn't understand why, but I knew all the answers lay within. And I had to do a lot of work on myself, and I leaned back into my childhood connection and grew it. So for about 10 years before Tommy's transition, my son's transition, I connected to my team. I called them my guides then, and I would get downloads. Sometimes I would hear them speaking to me, but predominantly it was downloads. And from there, I would help people on a daily basis with what I was being shown, what I was being taught. I would write articles. I would write thought-provoking discussions with a spiritual lean and so on for many years. And on this day, on the 20th of May, 2019, I probably never felt so spiritually fit in my life as I did on that day. Now, there's plenty of parents here in this meeting today, and we all know what a catastrophic day it is, that day when our child transitions, and it was no different to me. Prior to the day I've put on here, I had a chat with Tommy literally within the last few weeks of his life here. He knew I worked with spirit, he knew I worked with other people, and we talked about the afterlife, or the potential for the continuation of life after this one. And he was very diplomatic with his words, but frankly, he didn't believe. He just thought we went back to dust when we died. And I remember smiling and thinking, I hope you will feel it's more than that at some point in your lifetime. He was a wonderful person, and he touched many people in his time here. But I mention that simply because there's been, here and there you get experiences shared, especially NDEs, where they talk about if you're an atheist, when you die, you go and burn in hell, that type of thing. And it's absolute nonsense. Firstly, I don't hold any of my beliefs really in stone. I hold them all fluid, apart from the fact that there's no hell, apart from the one we generate ourselves, no devil. Again, that's apart from what we generate ourselves. And so, there was no hell for him as somebody that didn't believe to go to. And we had that chat. His behavior in those last few weeks was a little unusual as well. And I won't go into much of it. Suffice to say, he'd not chosen his college courses for that September, which is ridiculous in May when you're only a few weeks away from school finishing. Every year he backpacked somewhere different in the world. He'd save his money from his part-time job and he'd go backpacking. This year he saved his money and he hadn't actually gone and booked his trip, which was again really unusual. And the last time he saw his sister, which was on the Thursday night before his accident, he actually walked to the end of our driveway and watched her drive away and waved as she drove out of the community where we live. Never done that before. A very unusual thing for him to do. And I don't think at a conscious level he had any idea about what was going to happen. But little things like that were interesting. And from my perspective, my behavior in those last few weeks of his life, I became fixated on car accidents. I'd look up the stats for here in South Florida, where the accidents were happening. I would tell both kids, be careful when you drive. You're both responsible drivers, but not everybody is. It was on my mind all the time, but it was clearly something that was seeping into my consciousness, but I didn't know the full story of what was going to happen. And on the 20th of May, he was driving home at 6 a.m. in the morning. He was a mile away from home. He hit a tree and that was it. It was his first accident and it was his last. That was at 6 a.m. The turtle moment was, I'd had a connection to animals for pretty much my whole life. And certainly in those last few years that I'd built my connection up with my team on the other side, I would often get messages via animals. And I did so that morning. I took the dogs out first thing to go to the bathroom, and there was this huge turtle in the garden. It would have been about an hour after Tommy's accident, a mile down the road from where we lived. And I locked eyes with the turtle and I felt a download coming in. It's happened many times before, but this time I could tell as it was coming through, I started to feel full of fear. I didn't want to know it, whatever it was that was coming through. And I literally cut the communication. I stopped it being downloaded, and I'd never done that before. And I went inside. The reason I've put a Viktor Frankl quote here is, I remember I said I wrote daily in a forum to help people with their lives. Most of what I did had a spiritual lean. That was what I wrote about that day. I posted about that quote at 8 a.m. That morning. And the reason I mention it will be apparent a little later. And then the police didn't knock at the door until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And those of us that are parents know just how traumatic it is when we hear the news, if we're not there when it happens. The pain is off the Richter scale, and it's and you sort of err between pain and shock, certainly in those early weeks. But the day, about an hour after they left, I went to his room. He still lived at home, and I made his bed and I talked with him. My overriding concern as his mother was for his well-being. I talked to him to tell him, if he could see us, that he was going to see an awful lot of pain. The type of person he was, he would hate to see us in any sort of emotional pain at all, especially if he thought he was the cause. So I talked to him about that, and not to worry, but we would have to go through a lot of pain with him not being here, but we would be okay. So I was reassuring him, even an hour after the police had gone. I didn't know at the time if he could hear me, but because of my connection to my guides, I just figured he probably could. From there, in the early months after, they were mind-blowing how many signs and communications just came through almost from day one. I saw him at 6 weeks old. He actually didn't materialize. It was a holographic image. So I had explained to me later on, but in that hallway that you see there late at night, one night, he appeared, and I actually got a friend of his to make the sketch that you see, simply because I was concerned that I would forget what I'd seen. And of course you don't. I mean, it's still there as clear as when I saw it today. I didn't need it, but it's beautiful to have that. The Forever 21 bag you see there, I went to the crash site a few weeks later after his sister had been there and had found yet another piece of car wreckage. And I went armed with boxes to clear up whatever was left, so that people wouldn't be upset if they came across things like that, his friends or whatever that had visited there occasionally. And I was clearing out the undergrowth at the bottom of the tree that he had hit. And the words Forever 21 just jumped and literally hit me between the eyes. It's a fast road. There are no shops on there. You don't get pedestrians walking on that road. It's a fast road. What were the odds of a Forever 20? My son was 21. That there would be a Forever 21 bag at the base of the tree that he hit, where he took his last breath. And what was important about it was his birthday, his 22nd birthday, had been about 3 weeks after he passed. And I'd come across the phrase Forever 21. You know, people were using that phrase to talk about their children, especially when and I couldn't, I couldn't wrap my head around saying it. It was not, it was quite distressing, but he had been only 21. And as I came across the bag, I got a first clear download from him. And I wrote it down when I got back to the car, because I didn't have anything there. So it's paraphrased here. But he said, you know, the Forever 21, the phrase is limited to human thinking, perception, and reality. Yes, in human terms, I physically died at 21, but I'm right here, Mum. You know that. I didn't die. None of us die. You know that too. Such human thinking creates pain. Move past it, move beyond it. Forever isn't limited by a number. Forever is just that, eternal, everlasting, endless. This was a download. I was used to getting downloads from the team. This was the first download I had from Tommy. It was a pivotal moment for me, for my attitude towards all of this. The other things that you see there that I'm talking about is that a lot of people who have a connection or believe in God or follow some sort of faith, you know, fall out with their belief especially when you lose a child. They're angry, there's blame and so on. But because of the connection, my team my guides that I had built a relationship with was just based on unconditional love. It's all I knew from them. So I never thought, I didn't know why he had to go when he had to go at that time, but I knew there was no punishment. I knew there wasn't any judgment involved. So I leaned hard into my connection to my team while I built a new connection, a new way to communicate with my son. And importantly, for those of us that build a spiritual connection very quickly, it's so important to make time for your grief, to not bypass it with your connection, to actually feel what needs to be felt, because there's growth to be had there too. The interesting thing is, and I didn't realize this for quite some time, is what I've put there at the bottom. I journaled visually. Now, if you remember, I said that I used to write daily. I'd either write articles or thought-provoking sort of discussions with a spiritual lean. On that day, I stopped writing, and I figured it was just, I had no desire to write anymore after what had happened. But what I started to do right from day one was I would start taking photos and videos outside, because I couldn't quite pinpoint what had happened to me. I would walk out into my garden and I would feel connected to everything, connected to the animals, to the trees, to the breeze, to the sunlight. I was connected to everything. And the only way I could really wrap my head around it was to video my connections and take photos of what I was seeing, what I was drawn to be connected to. And it's when I go back to those videos, even in the first week or in the first 2 weeks now, with the tuning I have, my hearing now, I can hear the spirit world speak in the air. I can hear in some of those very early video recordings my team talking to me. It's on the videos and they're telling me to go within and talk to Tommy. He hears me and I can talk to him if I go within. I have those videos. I can go back and there's quite a few of them where there's a lot of talking and Tommy and my team and specific members in. So I really do have that visual journal has got more stories in it that I'm only just starting to explore now. This is, I didn't actually come across this for a couple more years, but this happened 2 days after he passed. He passed on the Monday, and on the Wednesday, this voicemail message was left on my phone, and I'll play it for you.
Hey, this message is for Tommy. Just Jacob, your buddy from online. Just wanted to check and make sure everything was okay. If you could give me a shout back, you know what's up. Thanks. Bye. Hey, this message is for Tommy. Just Jacob, your buddy from online. Just wanted to check and make sure everything was okay. If you could give me a shout back, you know what's up. Thanks. Bye.
What on earth is X? And what is a transmission for Tommy doing on my phone 2 days after his accident? His accident was on the Monday. This happened on the Wednesday. So I phoned the number. And when I found this, I'd already then by that stage discovered I had many phone calls from the spirit world, many phone calls from my team, from loved ones and so on. So I already knew I was being communicated with via my phone, by phone calls. So this was really curious. And I didn't know whether it was going to be an in-service number or not, but I phoned it and it was. And the guy that answered, it was his vocal tone. He was a friend of Tommy's. And as soon as he realized who I was, he got very emotional. It'd been 2 years and he called me Mrs. Stacey, how very sorry he was for Tommy's passing. And then I explained about this and he said he didn't have my telephone number. He'd never called me. And he remembers that day, the Wednesday, very clearly, because that's the day he found out what had happened to Tommy. And he'd taken the day off work. He was so distraught, he didn't speak to anybody. There is no way, even if he had my number, he would phone me. And if he did, he wouldn't say something like that. Luckily, by the time I found it 2 years later, I was aware that the spirit world will use the vocal tone of people. They will use that to leave messages. It's happened many times. In fact, my own vocal tone is used to speak as well. So I wasn't fazed by it, but I wondered, okay, 2 days after he passed, 48 hours, they are leaving Tommy a message, a transmission, dropping X. What happened, and you'll not hear it here, is August 2020, 15 months later, Tommy created a voicemail message a voice memo on my phone. He spoke in the voice memo app on my phone, and he saved it with a title of X. That's the very first time he sent me a voice memo, and they now drop X, and he responds with an X. And I've now been told since then it's his way of saying we're good to go. We're good to go. And things rapidly moved in a different direction at that point. So I want to break off from the story, just to go on to phone calls here, because I've just touched on this one. I get a lot of phone calls on an ongoing basis. I've just given a couple of pictures of a couple here. This the top one on the right, Let's Celebrate, is one from my landline. It is on point for his sister. It's Tommy. It's his vocal tone he had when he was here. Phoebe had just got a new job, and he says to her in the message he leaves, "This is for Phoebe. Let's celebrate." This is a message for Phoebe. Let's celebrate. It's on the website. You can play it. It's his vocal tone, and he's leaving a message, and it's very relevant to what's happening in her life now. The one you see at the bottom was just wonderful. It was I'd held multiple live conversations with Shelley and her little boy Dylan, and we had just finished the live conversation. As we just finished the live conversation, she and I were still chatting on Zoom. Normally I have my phone on silent. In fact, it may well have been, and they took it off silent, but my phone started to ring. And I said and what I normally do when my phone rings and it's not a number I know, is I let it go to voicemail, simply because if the spirit world are going to leave a message, they'll do so then. So I left it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 18 seconds long. 18 is Tommy's number, sign number. So I had a feeling that he had something to do with it. And I carried on talking with Shelley. She looked down at her phone at one stage and it said 1818. And I instinctively knew that her son had something to do with it as well. I went to play back the voicemail that had been left, and sure enough, both boys are talking on it. They crashed a cold call, and you can hear Dylan saying his name and "I love you, this is Dylan." You can hear Tommy speaking. Both of them crashed a cold call, and both of them talked during it, immediately following the live conversation. This here is fascinating. It's just an example. If you look down, these are multiple voicemails I get from random numbers, and they are all just over 1 minute long, 1 minute 2 seconds, 1 minute 1 second, and so on. And these are calls that I get from usually my team, but Tommy sometimes as well. It's a very raspy, whispery message with interference, but I can hear it because I'm tuned into hearing it. What's good about them is they're malleable. They will do what I call go live. I can have a live conversation with somebody on that 1 minute voicemail message. In fact, one of them was a mentor of mine on the other side, who phoned, leaving his name and a message. And I brought Sally Taylor in and brought it up for her to listen to. And he went live on it there and then. And he introduced himself to Sally. He talked, they had an interactive conversation. It went live and she got to talk to him. And he's a mentor of mine on the other side. So I get these phone calls all the time, but they are frequency related. Although Sally could hear them, not necessarily everybody would hear them. And they come through. The other type I get is this one here, and I'm going to play it for you. Something could be happening in my life, and my phone will go, and I will instinctively know sometimes it's them, and they leave me a message relating to something, whatever's happening. In this situation, I was a little concerned the way I'd phrased something, and I was checking it out with a friend. Her name's Nicole, if she thought what I had said was okay. And she was, yeah, it's fine. As she's telling me this, my phone cuts up with the fact of voicemail messages being left. And I just knew. And I played it back, and all it says is 2 words with an Irish accent in Spanish. Sorry, I should have told you. I did it at the original speed, then I slowed it down because it's all right. And that's all he said was, it's all right. In other words, what I was concerned, it's all right. And I immediately phoned the number, and it was not a number, not an in-service number, but that's an example of them phoning me. And I've had quite a few of those. So I get phone calls on an ongoing basis. Okay, I'm not going to, I could spend the rest of this session talking about signs and communications. They are an area that I was fascinated in, especially in that first year and a half. And my team and Tommy accommodated me in every way with my questions on signs and how they worked, etc. They would set me up with the most amazing sign happenings so that I could teach other people how signs occur. People would have a preconceived idea, or I would have a preconceived idea, and they would show me something to completely open that up to something much bigger. You'd have, for example, in one of the groups I have, somebody on their own spiritual journey, somebody had written something, could have been me, about a feather sign. And she'd added to it the fact feathers aren't signs. They are something a bird naturally does. They shed a feather and you find it, but it doesn't make it a sign. I get proper signs. And I think, most of you here would know anything can be a sign. Anything can be a sign. It's the timing, which is usually exquisite. It's the feeling that comes with it that creates the sign. It can be anything. And so far as feathers are concerned, I used to think, well, they would either be in a port and it would be put in a place where you should not find a feather, or it would be a feather. There's a line naturally where you find a feather, but the key is they would get you to walk and come across the feather and then just fill you with a feeling of them. So they decided to take it one stage further, and I was filming a couple of birds from the upstairs balcony. Tommy comes into my mind and he says, "Mum, the bird on the right's going to leave you a feather." And I continue to video the birds, and sure enough, 2 minutes later, this huge big bird turns around, plucks a huge feather from the back and drops it on my patio. Luckily, it's just it made me laugh, but that's, of course, they were just expanding on a particular sign. I could lose myself for the whole rest of the session talking about this. So I'm going to move forward before I should mention, actually, just looking here, the other thing I wondered, I began communicating with others in spirit. Before Tommy's passing, I only communicated with my team and through animals as well sometimes, but I didn't communicate with others that had passed, and that started happening as well. Initially flash visits, then they got bigger, and then they came with messages and so on. That was the mental mediumship opening up at this stage. Right, going back to the timeline before I got onto the signs. Remember I said there was that period between the transmission for Tommy, 15 months later when we left the voicemail. Tommy left the voicemail. So at this stage, after he'd left that first voicemail, he left another voicemail. He activated my voicemail on my phone as I was walking. I noticed it was activated. I was carrying a coffee cup at the time. I put it down. I was next to his urn. I put my hand on his urn and I said, "Hi." And he responded, "Hey." And that was that. And I was like, how is this happening? And it wasn't falling in line with anything I understood with EVP, because there was no sounds in my environment. It was completely quiet. It's only at this stage that I know, because I now hear spirit talking to me in my house and externally. I hear with my ears. I hear it as it's been spoken here. And I now have been told I would have heard, had I been tuned in the way I am now, I would have heard him speaking then. So he bounced back these memos, and then I wondered, can I do this? Because my immediate thought was, could I use this to help other people? Is this, like people do with EVP? So I started in my garden to reach out on my voice memo app, which is what he'd used. Because my mental mediumship was opening up, I could draw people to me and start having conversations. And, sometimes I'd bring somebody to me and they'd bring another person to me that they knew in the spirit world and so on. This is as the mental mediumship was expanding. But what was fascinating was, and why I've put an example of a sound wave here, is in these this is me talking here, incidentally. This is me. I've clicked the voicemail memo on my phone and I'm just talking, but having an internal conversation clairaudiently with somebody on the other side. And what is fascinating is the flat sound wave. When I would listen to the flat sound waves, I could hear so many people talking. And I wrote down at the time, it feels like I have entered a vast sea of consciousness. But I at that stage, I wasn't understanding what it was. Going on to hearing the spirit world now, I didn't know what to put as a visual. So I put a picture of my garden, because this is predominantly where I hear the spirit world speak. So Tommy's, me communicating and using the voice memo app on my phone started in August 2020. And in October, within 8 weeks, I started hearing them speak in the air. It first happened in my garden, and I'm thinking, am I going a little crazy here? Did I really hear that? Then on the 1st of November, I was reaching out to a client's son in spirit, asking, a question of him, and I heard his answer in the air. And because I had my voice memo on recording going, it captured it. And then I knew it was real, that I actually was hearing them with my ears, and I captured it this time. And that was in November, and it just built. By January, I joked with them, and it's on the website, are you going to continue to talk with me in the air? And my team just sitting in the garden, we are. That same month, in that same January, in 2021, there was I reached out to a woman in spirit who had a son here. It was his 5th birthday that day. And to ask her if she had a message for him, which is what, was being asked of me to ask. And my whole team just spoke in the air around me. The little boy's name was Colton. Happy birthday, Colton. My team incidentally tend to use either an Irish or an English accent when they speak with me, because they know I love those accents. So it's predominantly English, but sometimes Irish. So happy birthday, Colton. Happy birthday, Colton. Happy birthday, Colton. Just being spoken in the air around me. And of course, I captured it because I was recording on my voice memo app. That was phenomenal. And it just kept growing. I have hundreds and hundreds of audio of speaking to the spirit that way now. It's part of my weekly life. It's the most, and it's my absolute favorite way to connect with them, is to hear them speak in the air next to me. It's just lovely. It makes me feel as if they're right here, which of course they are. It's only in the last year, and I do attribute it to the physical mediumship circle that I sat with, which I'll speak about later, as that of being part of it, that I've been able to hear them speak in the house. It's not as loud or as vocal as it is outside, but I do hear them speak. And there are plenty of evidential clips on the website where I've confirmed in real time what I'm hearing. As it's happening, as I'm hearing more whispered tones in the house, but outside, I've heard my team, my mother, ciao, Sally, it's mum speaking. It's her voice, and family back home who've listened to it here and have recognized it. It's her voice. Just incredible. So, and I've heard many of the children, especially that I've worked with, of parents on the other side, have spoken in the air as well, where I can capture it. I make keepsakes, and I run a register now that people can have their names for special birthdays. I'll reach out on birthdays. The kids love that. They will sing happy birthday in the air or make some music or something. Sometimes it's not always possible, and I don't fully understand why, but atmospheric conditions do play a part, and I'm not talking about our weather systems, but I know you had Stephen Berkeley on here not too long ago. I did a session with him for he just gave me a picture and a name. I had no idea who it was, whether it's a relative or friend or whatever. His name was Jeffrey, as it happens, and I went to connect with him before we had the live conversation in my outside. And I always do these connections at the quietest time of day. No breeze, no birds, nothing at the quietest time of day, because A, I can hear, and B, if they do speak in the air, I can capture something that hopefully I can do a keepsake with. So it was like 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and I kind of went outside to connect, and I hit record on my voice memo, and I reached out to Jeffrey, this guy Jeffrey, and the next thing, you could have heard a pin drop. It was that quiet. It's Jeffrey for you. Wake up. And it was so loud and it was so clear. I was delighted. I couldn't wait to do something with it for Stephen to be able to hear it. But when I listened back to what I'd recorded, it's full of interference. But I couldn't hear any interference standing there. You could have heard a pin drop. So that's interesting. I'm not quite sure what was behind that. As it happens, I was able to make something for him, and he can hear Jeffrey's voice. So that's great. So but my team have told me, sometimes I don't hear people speaking out loud, and it is to do with atmospheric conditions. Okay, this is the fun bit. This is what I want everybody to do. Is one of the, I did initially think it's problematic. It's actually an advantage for what I'm doing now. Both of these things you see here are examples of what I hear in the air. You won't be able to hear them, I doubt very much. You will be able to hear them until you hear me say the correct thing that is being said. And when I do that, I am grounding what they're saying in our physical earth plane. That was something Susan Wilson explained to me when I couldn't understand what my team were telling me as to why I have to say it before people hear it. But it's a grounding. That's what I'm doing. But it's when it's grounded, you will hear it crystal clear. So what I've done here is I've put a couple of comments here, and I've said different things that it will say. And it's only when I say the real thing that is being spoken that you will hear it. Well, at least most of you, hopefully. So here we go. Look for the roses. That's me suggesting what it says. The dog's not happy. Happy birthday, Colton. I'll stop it here because I want to move. There was one phrase in there that was correct. I can't see anybody there, but I would hope that some of you, when I said the right phrase, would have heard you would have heard Spirit clearly saying that. I'm going to play one more. This is just a second example, similar thing. I will say several phrases, but only only me stating the correct phrase. Will you hear it? Let her speak with you. Watch the curly one. It's a bottomless question, Sally. Be silent, don't worry. Let us continue. Anyway, I can't see anybody, but I'd hope some of you were able to hear when the right phrase was being said. So onwards we go. All I wanted to get here was around this time, the same time as what was happening just then, was my team started to talk to me about physical mediumship. What? they had been telling me over and over again for quite some time that it was not EVP. What I was doing was not EVP. And I knew from the fact that I didn't need any sound sources that I was hearing and so on in the air and so on, that it was something very different. And then I had a sole one-on-one reading with a wonderful medium in Scotland who confirmed the physical mediumship that my team had mentioned. And then I had an impromptu session with Susan Wilson. She was doing a spirit guide. I asked her a question about my clairaudience. Her guides talked with mine, and my physical mediumship was confirmed then. Then I had a one-on-one with her later on, a few months later. The very first thing she said to me as we sat there was, "You're a PM." I thought, what? And I mean, I'm English. I mean, you think PM, you think Prime Minister. And I'm like, what? And then it dawned on me what she meant. And instinctively, I looked at, how does she know? And it took a while for it to settle, because I am married for 30 years, together 36. I'm family orientated. They are my everything. I love animals. I love nature. I couldn't resist that photo of the goat. I talked with that goat for about an hour. I swear to God, that was one very happy goat. That's what I identified with: my love of nature, my love of animals, being a family person, you know, my children, my husband. This physical mediumship was something it took a while for me to absorb it. And of course, all I knew was the dark seance rooms and the ectoplasm. I didn't know very much then, but I did get to know more, and I became fascinated then with Leslie Flint and many of the other sort of physical mediums and what they'd been, but what was mine all about? And I was told it was energy based. Now, there's very little out there. There's a huge amount out there on mental mediumship. There's some out there on physical mediumship related to ectoplasm, etc., but on energy based, very little. I was fortunate to have some really lovely conversations with Robin Foy. He was phenomenal, gave me a lot of his time, and very helpful. But it took me a while to come to terms with the fact that I had physical mediumship in as a part of my mediumship. Around the same time that was happening, the sound waves that I was trying to create mementos for people that I was reaching, you know, for clients I was reaching out to, children, trying to create keepsakes of what they were saying became almost impossible, because the sound waves started going live. I didn't tell anybody, because I thought, you know, people are going to think I'm going a little nuts here. What's going on? And I say this because February 21 or something, I wrote Annabella Cardoso was one of many people I reached out to, trying to understand what was happening, what was this about. And I was talking to a few people related to ITC and EVP, etc., trying to understand it. And before we got on our Zoom meeting, I remembered something, and I thought she'll enjoy hearing this. And I went to listen to the quality to make sure it was good enough for her to listen to. Instead of it saying what I'd recorded months before, my team said, "Good luck and have confidence in yourself." I just stared at my screen and I said, what? And of course, Annabella Cardoso is just the most amazing person. We had a very long sort of conversation on Zoom, and she wasn't fazed by it at all. She was just fascinated. She didn't think I'd grown two heads, and it was the very first time I outed the fact that this was happening. From there, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I continued to talk with my team and Tommy live, interactively, using a sound wave, being told how it was working, because the sound wave would never change, but the output, what was in the air, was changing. Eventually I asked the question, and I have to play this because it was...
This sound wave communication that I can do with you and play it back over and over again is phenomenal. And the way we have a two-way conversation through it. Is that something that I do potentially with children? I could, as parents, I could make a recording with them and then connect with them and try and repeat questions being asked in real time from their parents? Is it something that could be done, or isn't it something to be done?
Anyway, the enormity of what that meant I could do, I was like a deer in headlights. For 24 hours, I did nothing apart from think of, oh my God, I could do this for others. And the funny thing you see there is the following day I had to go to somewhere and I parked up the car. When I hopped back in the car, I listened to it. Absolutely, just still lost in the fact that I was going to be able to do this to help other people. And as I'm driving out of the space, the sign you see on the car opposite me in the car park sort of jumped out and hit me between the eyes. Just do it. That was my team telling me to just get off my backside and being so completely in awe of it all and just get down, roll my sleeves up and get going. And sure enough, I did. 2 days later, I held my first live conversation with a little boy called Charlie. And it was incredible. And I've been holding live conversations ever since for the last 2.5 years. I did just quickly say, this is not to play. This is music came to be in July. Ironically, I'd had a session with Susan Wilson a couple of weeks before, and she'd mentioned my team had said they were going to be sending music or enjoyed sending me music. And I was confused. Did they mean the music I like to sit to with my team? And then 2 weeks later, it's the first time they sent music in the air. I was in my garden and they created music in the air. The love that came through with that music was just so immense. The only thing that I could liken it to is the love I felt when I first saw my children when they were born. It was huge. And I was lost to it for a good couple of weeks. Every time I listened to it, I would end up in tears, but they created music on several occasions, and some of it's beautiful, and it was in the air. January 22 is when Symphony came to be. Symphony, my team that I had worked with until that point were just my guides, and a big changeover happened. They told me it was happening. I could feel it. I could feel the change out of guides that I was familiar with, I'd gotten to know. And this new team arrived, and they were a collective, and they gave me a name for themselves of Symphony. It was important they had a name. They gave a name for themselves, and their wisdom just took my breath away. And that's the team that I work with now. And many people work with Symphony too. And they're having amazing experiences of their own since. This here is just to show, I have a logo design. I'm very visual. I'm a visual person. They actually designed my logo for me. Using this bird bath in my garden is what I use as a coffee table. I take my coffee out in the morning and I plonk it on there. This day I go out and I'm snagged by that tea, the branch in the tea for Tommy. And from there, the download came from Symphony. Tommy had already suggested that whatever logo I came up with, I surrounded it. He wanted his contribution to be the outside circle, the circle that enclosed it all. Then Symphony initially called themselves a circle, so I wanted another circle within the logo design. From there, they brought this, they said, put one circle inside the other circle, where you see the reflection of the trees here. Put your angel wings there, because I've always had an affinity to angels. Put the wings each side of the inner circle, and they likened them to here, down here. And my daughter then made a spin on the inner circle, a play on words of sun and sun. But yeah, so they designed my logo, just to give you a little bit. And from there, same time, very important from an understanding what frequency is. By now, I'd been holding live conversations for quite some time. Ignore that. That should say 2022, not 21. I've been doing them now for a year. You can never tell how well people are going to be able to hear their loved ones on the other side through these interactive conversations. The night before this conversation took place, Symphony told me the following day, Charlie's dad, Jason, was going to hear him. And it was really unusual. They never usually gave me advance warning, advance notice of who was going to be able to hear and who wasn't. So when the live conversation started the next day and he couldn't hear, I wondered what was going on. And this was the very first time it happened, about 29 minutes in, and I did what I always do. I listen, I say what I hear, and so on. At 29 minutes in, Charlie suddenly says, the frequency of the conversation is going to change. I repeat out loud what I'm hearing. It's the first time this has ever happened. I start to feel very buzzy. Physically, I'm being very affected by it. And then Charlie says to his dad, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And this, you can see the expression, because all of a sudden, after, it's fabulously evidential, he can hear his son. You won't be able to hear the words, but you can just see his expression. See him nodding. He just suddenly realizes he can hear his son. He can hear his son speaking. Which was amazing. I have one more here from those early days. This is Donna. I wasn't actually looking to capture these moments. You can see where my phone was set up. I was actually trying to record my screen to prove that the sound waves never change. I can play a 15-second sound wave for 2 hours. Four people in spirit can come through and talk on that 15-second sound wave. You will hear thousands of comments come from it. That sound wave never changes. The changes happen outside of the computer here. This is where the words are molded. But this is another early one. This is where she can suddenly hear, it's about half an hour in, and her son is saying, can you hear me? Yeah, powerful moment for her to actually hear her son. And from there on in, frequency realignments happen in all of the sessions, but they usually happen very early on. I don't actually feel them happening anymore, but initially, around the same time as the frequency realignments happened, images came to be. They had wanted to bring me images the previous year. They wanted to do it via the TV, but it didn't happen because I couldn't work out which TV or what channel, and I was so busy with the live conversations and doing anything else. I didn't have a lot of interest in images, to be honest. But fast forward a year, and to this, you won't hear. This is one of the very first image downloads that happened, and you can see how far back my phone was. Again, I wasn't expecting images, so it's right on the far end of my desk to record the sound wave. This is where they were, and the images are at the far end of their room on a kitchen cabinet. So hence the quality is fairly poor, because it is so far away, but you can see the little girl's image, and it's a talking image. I'm not sharing it because it's the audio, because it's frequency related, but she's saying, I'm making a movie. Her lips move with the words saying, I'm making a movie. It's a talking, and that was one of the first to come through. Images have now been coming through ever since. It's extraordinary. They don't need anything from us. They literally, and well, Sally Taylor is involved. Alex, who's here, is involved. There's a whole team of people now involved dealing with the image videos. Hundreds of images can be downloaded in a matter of a 2-minute video that I take. They're not, and on the whole, they're not immediately visible. You need to change the contrast of light and dark. When you've changed the contrast in light and dark, that's where they can be seen. And yeah, hundreds. And it's been quite a journey, but it's also been very labor intensive. That was the time with the frequency lines and this, when I had to reach out in my groups for help. It was far too big just for me. I couldn't cope with the amount of phenomena that was happening. And now I have a wonderful group of people that help me in all aspects of what I'm doing some of them are here tonight, and I'm just so grateful. I couldn't be doing it without them. The other thing I want to mention in respect of images is I get an enormous amount of images just in my natural surroundings. And I've got an example here. In my car here. This was on Tommy's anniversary. He plays with the streetlights all the time. It's in daylight. He made it flash 3 times, which is his I love you sign. But then there is an interesting mist that was surrounding the light, and loads of images. Sally Taylor incidentally drew this sketch of the image you see here. But if you watch the red circle, the video will stop. There you go. So you've got the hooked nose here, the eye, the mouth, the chin, perfectly formed face, very similar to what Sally's drawn here. This is probably a headband above it, but let me play again. And this is done without any props or any assistance from us. This is what they can do. It's amazing how much they can affect our physical environment and do.
Sally, where do you hope that this will go? I mean, do you have, is it just one day at a time, or are you just sort of
No, the latest thing that they are talking about on an ongoing basis is bringing our worlds together, closer together through cell phone technology. I run a community at the moment of people that their hearing is improving all the time. Their exposure to Symphony, they sit with Symphony on a regular basis. My team, their own ability to hear is growing. People, they are looking to bring out at some stage, I don't know the time scale, it's effectively, I won't use the term soul phone because I don't want to tread on Gary Schwartz's toes. So we came up with the phrase, my team did, the Symphony phone, but it's like a personalized soul phone, for want of a better way of putting it. It's related to your personal frequency. You can speak to your loved ones on the other side and your teams on the other side on your own personal frequency. That's what they're looking to roll out next. And there are quite a few people, but you have to be vibrationally ready for it. It's not going to be available to everybody. And I like the sacred aspect of this, with it being your personal frequency. It's not like you can sit there and Joe Blogs and someone else, your Auntie Mary, you can sit there and everybody can hear this person in spirit talking. You have to maintain your frequency, and you will hear them speak on your personal frequency. You will have an interactive conversation. I can have an for 2.5 years, I can have an interactive conversation with my team, loved ones of others, because of the mediumship, as well as my own loved ones, on my phone. That's what they're looking to roll out for others, which I'm just delighted at. I can't, I don't know the timescales, but they've talked about that to others too. It's not something that they're keeping under wraps now, which tells me that there are things in the pipeline. They are bringing it forward.
I mean, this is very exciting. I think this is what has, as I understand it, has been completely missing from the soul phone idea. When people talk about the soul phone, there's no sense of personal responsibility or raising your vibrations and sort of melding your vibrations with the spirit world, which is such a fundamental thing in mediumship. And so I'm really excited for you, Sally, not only for you, but for where this could go.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the important thing as well, Wendy, is gatekeeping.
Yes.
Yeah, my gatekeepers, they are the gatekeepers of all the live conversations, and they are the gatekeepers on my phones. Somehow that will be incorporated into whatever they do, whether it's people's individual teams or Symphony, I don't know, but it will be a secure line. You will speak with your loved ones. You won't be open to random sort of interruptions.
Well, this is obviously, do you ever have to do any kind of protection rituals?
No.
No,
No, it's everything is overseen by Symphony. right, everything is overseen. They everything. It's been wonderful. It had a once I became tuned to be able to hear, people send me videos from time to time for different things. In fact, I think she's here somewhere. My friend Cadley is here. She sent me a video once to look at something, a light anomaly she had in the video. But as I played it, I heard her son speak. I know her son from the live conversation. So I said, listen, at 36 seconds, she listened, she could hear him. I ground the vibration of her son speaking in her own video, and she could now hear him speaking. Fast forward a little time, she'd been through a lot. It was late at night. She decided to video in her bedroom, very tired, been through an awful lot, to see if there was any orbs. And she got a communication come through. She sent it to me. She didn't tell me what she felt about it. Immediately I heard it. I could tell straight away it was a random spirit. They can be mischief makers, you know. I don't fear them, but and I cut it dead. I don't entertain them. I just put my boundary, and I told Kat, you know, that's not your son. And she said, I knew, I felt it wasn't right. I felt it. And that's where you need to be. She was able to determine herself that that wasn't her son speaking then. And instinct told me straight away. So people send me things, and usually I can tell straight away if it's a rogue sort of mischievous spirit, or if it's genuinely a loved one that's coming through to speak. This communication they're looking to roll out with people using their cell phones, there will be some sort of gatekeeping and boundary put in place. The one thing that I was going to finish on is my development circle, my physical mediumship development circle came to be as a result of your meeting. That's how I met Gary. It's how I met Sally. We've been sitting for almost a year. We do have independent direct voice occurring during, we sit in daylight. We've had independent voice and all sorts of phenomena happening. And it happened as a result of me reaching out in one of your meetings. So thank you.
Well, that's wonderful.
That's
Well,
great.
I mean, the work you're doing is absolutely fascinating. And this is only the beginning.